my favorite spells are spells that can be done anywhere and practically everywhere. And this type of spell, the living spell, is something I'm teaching on August 25th. And for this spell, you can do it anywhere that you want. Currently, I'm at the park. This is one of my favorite parks. And I'm sitting in my car and I'm about to do some magic. And nobody around me, nobody at this park is going to know what I'm doing. It's going to look like a simple everyday task. And all I need for it is a journal notebook, a digital journal, digital notebook, and my imagination, so that I can tap into this energy and feed this living spell, a spell that builds potency over time, a spell that is proactive, bringing me the things into my life, the people, the opportunities, the wealth, the prosperity before I need it, so that I'm not reactionary in my magic, so that I am feeding this spell every single day, making it a potent resource for my daily life. So if you're interested, go to leandrawitchwood.com and get more information. Blessed be.
This time in the Magick Kitchen, we're talking all things divination and land-based divination.
I'm Leandra Witchwood.
And I'm Elyse Wells.
And welcome to the Magick Kitchen Podcast, where we talk about magic, kitchen witchcraft, herbs,
and everything in between. Today, we are joined by Joanna Farrar, the author of The Diviner's Path, a nature-led approach to divination with tarot, runes, and pendulums. Joanna Farrar is a witch, seer, and gifted musician who draws from a lifetime of divinatory practice and public ritual leadership to share grounded, empowering guidance. Her work bridges the symbolic world of music with animist spirituality. Joanna also hosts the Coffee and Divination podcast. Learn more at coffeeanddivination.com. And y'all also might know Joanna from my life, because Joanna's been on Seeking Numina a couple times, and her and I are travel buddies. We've seen most of Greece together, the mainland of Greece together. We've seen a good bit of the Anatolian coast of Turkey together, and we have a lot of projects in the works for that hopefully we'll have more to share on that soon. But we couldn't wait to have Joanna on the show to talk about her new book. It just came out in June. It's so good. And we haven't done an episode on divination before, so we're really excited to get to do this with an expert in the room. Welcome.
Yeah, welcome.
I am very humbled by that introduction, to be called the expert on divination. I do love it quite a bit, so I will accept the title for now.
So tell us what the heck is divination, because we don't define these terms that often as witches. I think we just use them. So just tell us what divination is, and then tell them about augury and how they're different, but the same,
Yes.
Just a few little things to start with. Divination could be defined as something where you are going to attempt to discover information through occulted means. So occult, I'm sure many of your listeners, you guys certainly know, simply just means secret or hidden, right? So you're using a technique which will get you information that is normally occulted, that is normally not accessible. So divination can look like and use so many different tools, including our own intuitive powers. It can be, psychic mediumship. It can be dreams. It can be dropping into trance for an oracle, or it can be throwing cards on a table or looking at clouds. It can also be breaking open your little fortune cookie. Like, technically, that is divination, because you are attempting to get a form of knowledge that is not normal, that is not the usual, typical, rational way of reasoning from point A to point B. It takes you through, like, maybe point Z or point 2.0 over there. And then you will get information from another source. When I define divination, I also define it as a form of relationship and a technique of very similar to using a different language. So if you're taking in that occulted information, you're also using non-ordinary language in order to get that information. Because we are, in my opinion, when we do divination, we are speaking with spirits. Those could be land spirits, those could be gods, those could be your higher self, if you want to just think of it as going to the collective unconscious or something like that. There's a lot of different ways you can frame it, but you are going to other forms of beings or other forms of knowledge, and then you need a language and a technique in order to grasp that information and bring it back in a way that you can understand it. So divination is the art of going and trying to access that information and then being able to understand it and interpret it.
Beautifully said. And those languages, for those who are like, what do you mean a language? We mean like tarot. It's 78 cards. The major arcana, the minor arcana. Each suit has an element. Those elements mean these things. So that's the language in that case. Or the runes. They're different characters with different meanings.
Exactly. Yeah. So anything that you can think of as a technical, especially technical forms of divination, those are the different symbolic languages. But there's a lot of them, and that's the thing. There are literally thousands. There are probably as many different types of divination, certainly as there are cultures that have existed in the world that currently exist. And plenty of others that, aren't listed on any Wikipedia page ever, that have been lost to time because the cultures are lost. It's uncountable. And therefore, the ways of sort of accessing that information, of learning different languages, just like, if we think about human languages, there are an enormous number of them. Sadly, some of them are dying out every day. But that multiplicity of languages is also because there's multiplicities of types of knowledge and, types of information that we can get when we learn these languages, these symbolic tools and languages, to then go out and bring that information back. Augury, as to bring back what you said, is one of those techniques. And it's a fabulous one. It's defined differently by various scholars and different people. So when people throw the terms augury and omens around in the modern day, it can mean a lot of different things. So I don't get hung up on the definitions, because I also know, words are tricky. We all use them differently. But augury, the way that I define it, is essentially the act of interpreting the movements of and the actions of living birds. Most likely birds, but it can also be weather phenomena, it can be other animals. But it originally, it really had more to do with patterns and movements of birds. But with modern day augury, the way that I define it, I also include weather and animals and any other natural phenomena. And therefore, like anything that you observe can then become omen observation that you then take in, and you can then learn to interpret that and use that for guidance, because that's another form of relationship where you're speaking to spirits and the world around you kind of answers back.
And I'm curious about that, because I use birds to divine. And I always referenced it as, I always screw this one up, ornithomancy?
Yeah, ornithomancy. Yep.
Okay. Yep. Okay, good. I said that right.
Well, no, we
always
could
mess
both
that
be
one up.
mispronouncing it. No, we really could be. I'm
absolutely.
So it's fine.
Yeah. And I leave my pronunciations of things, very loose. But I have a cool story about a bird that just happened at the strawberry moon. So my little covenant, we did a full moon ritual. And I had everybody end with some fire scrying, so pyromancy. And the idea there was to end it with, see if you can get any additional messages, see if you can get any intuitive nudges with the work we just did. And the only thing I got out of it is like I could see a road opening. It was a big road that was opening. It was real wide in the fire. I'm like, okay, cool. That's a good message. But the next morning, I'm laying in the bed and I'm in the woods. I'm in the middle of the woods up in the Adirondacks. So there's nothing but trees around. It's 50 acres surrounded by trees. And the animals do not normally come up to the house. They stay pretty far away from the house. So I've been there for almost a week. And every morning I would lay in the bed, because this has this huge window with a sliding glass door. And there's these two inlay windows up at the very top of the room where you can see like the pendant porch light, and then you can see the trees. Really cool room. And so I would open the door every morning, put the screen on because of the bugs. And I would just lay there and listen to the birds in the distance in the 50 acres. But this morning, the morning after, and I'm still opening myself to divination, all of a sudden I'm seeing robins just on the porch, going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I'm like, okay, there's something happening here. So I started paying attention. And I think this is where we get confused about what it means to divine, especially using animals or weather or bugs, because it, to me, the way I teach it is it needs to be an instance where it's unusual. It's not something you see every day or every week or frequently. So as soon as they started coming closer to the house, I'm like, there's something here. And just as I acknowledged it, that's when the one bird flew up to that very top window, perched on the pendant, and started pecking at the window. I'm like, hi, thank you. Message received, So I just thought that was a good example of maybe of paying attention, of being open to the messages coming in and knowing that when it's a message and when it's not. I think that's where people struggle a lot. Can you speak to that?
It is one of the biggest topics. Anytime I bring up this with people, it is, and it's a concern for me as a teacher as well. I will just say, I'm sure it is for both of you as well, because we understand that this is a tricky art. And therefore, how we do this requires a lot of discernment and a lot of care. What you described there is exactly the key to it, which is observation and pattern recognition. Honestly, a lot of this, every form of divination involves pattern recognition, symbolic recognition, and the ability to sort of synthesize that together, right? But if you are not first and foremost observing the world around you, if you're not aware, if you're walking through and it's just, well, every room is like every other room. And I unfortunately think that a lot of modern day life encourages this, where people will sort of almost not see the forest for the trees, ha, ha, ha. But really that there is this sort of blindness that people will think that the world is sort of a very human, man-made enclosure around us. And therefore we've lost sight of noticing, like you did, that the birds do not typically come up to the porch. Some people may not have noticed that. And therefore the difference, that the fact that you had done the observation work before, the fact that you were reflecting on the world around you and noticing it, paying attention to it, then meant that they could send you that sign afterwards. If you don't do the observation work first, if you're not discerning and taking in and being like able to accept and receive information around you first and foremost as a baseline, then you can't notice the things that punch through as the ones that are unusual. So that's, I think when people first come to this, they will get overwhelmed, because that might be, if that's when you first just turn on your ability to notice, then yes, everything is going to be new and unusual to you, which is fine and great and beautiful. But then you have to allow yourself time to establish the baseline so that then when you need it, the spirits can come through like that.
And sometimes it can be it can seem so usual, it can seem so ordinary. So this land, I've been working with it for about a year now to heal it, because it was heavily logged and it's got a lot of scars. It's got a lot of damage, a lot of trauma in it. And last year, the husband of the owner, he kept getting stung when he was out maintaining the trails. And I'm like, okay, there's something here. So I went up to where he kept getting stung and I sat. And when I was sitting, nothing was happening. I could sense that there was something in one of the denser parts that it was being protected. I could sense that. But that's my work with the land and with the trees. The trees were being very, very protected. It wasn't until I got up and I started walking to a certain portion of the trail that all of a sudden a fly started buzzing in my face, just would not leave me alone. And I'm like, okay. So I stopped. And as soon as I stopped, it went away. And so this is one of those observations, because a fly, if it wants something from you, whether it be sweat or, whatever it's trying to get from you for survival, it won't leave you alone, right? So I kept testing it. So I'd walk a little further, it would come up. And then all of a sudden I hit a point where it was no longer the fly, it was hornets. And I'm like, here's the spot. Here's the place that's being protected. And so in my work, that's when I sit down and I have a conversation with the trees and with the flowers and with the brambles and, explain to them what's happening here. And after that, it subsided, at least for me. I haven't checked in with the owners yet, but for me, at least it subsided. But I can give them then instructions. Like, if you're seeing this means something. So just have a conversation. Intuitively or out loud, however.
Yeah, I mean, that is 100%. So it's covered later in the book. So a lot of what we're talking about right now is covered in the later chapters of my book, The Diviner's Path, because some of this is It's I want to not, discourage people. It's very doable for everybody. If you are listening to this episode, you can go out and you can obviously sit and listen and hear all these things, and you can do it. But it also does require maybe a little bit more time and discernment in order to build those skills. But later in the book, we talk about how exactly, Leandra, like what we have done here on our land is very similar. My husband and I live on 40 acres, and I don't talk about this so much in the book because it's more practical based, but it did have quite a bit of damage done to it by previous owners, not through any, malintent or anything, but a lot of like sort of mining was done of various things. It was essentially gravel pitted very, very heavily. And so there's areas of our land that, even though it was very welcoming to us when we first bought it, and the spirit communication was immediate when we were, there's some funny stories there. But there were certainly some areas that were not open to us on these 40 acres. And there are still some areas that are not what I would consider super friendly to humans. And I think that is totally fine. I think that's another element sometimes of spirit communication that people will either over dramatize and say like, all spirits are out to get you and they will hurt you. Or they will be like, no, all of them are fluffy and they all love us. There's so much variety of that, even on one patch of land. And like you were shown by that fly and by those bees, like there are elements where we need to be paying attention in ways where we understand where our boundaries are and where the land's boundaries are. And that's divination. That is communication just as much as flipping tarot cards are. It is very, very physical, as your friends found out through the being stung. That is an extremely physical way of communicating with us humans. And sometimes, unfortunately, that is the only way they can get things across to us. So those types of physical time spent in a place will give you that type of communication. And then that is the symbolic language and the communication that you're building in a spiritual form with a place. And that doesn't require tarot cards. It just requires you and paying attention and time.
Picture this. You light a candle before opening your laptop, before pricing your next offer, before creating your next digital download. And you do it without fear. You don't feel drained or pulled too tight. I'm inviting you to Hex the Hustle, a 4-week journey for business witches and those who are considering being a business witch, to discover which of my divine feminine archetypes is currently running your business. And when you discover this archetype, I will create for you a personalized grimoire showing you exactly how this archetype runs your business and how you can infuse your business with magic. This is for witches, mystics, healers, and divine service providers tired of the borrowed hustle model. To claim your seat and get your customized grimoire, find the link in the show notes or visit leandrawitchwood.com. Come with me and let's create a different business model.
So let's talk about different forms of divination that people can get started with. Is there one that you would say, as a beginner, if you want a form of divination to begin with, this is the one to start with?
I always love to tell people to get a pendulum because it's
I knew you were going to say that. I agree.
Yeah, it's so easy. You just, have it in your purse, have it in your car. It's there, and it's a very easy one to calibrate, to feel very comfortable with. It's not for everybody. I have met some people that I've been like, well, that's a good one to start with. And they're like, I've never gotten a good result from a pendulum. So it's not like all of these, they're not foolproof in that sense. But I think that 99% of people will have good results if you give the time to learning pendulums. The reason why I also always teach pendulum first is that it's a great one to then have as a backup for discernment. So we're talking about discernment here. Immediately, we were diving into spirit communication through, omens and augury. Well, you can then always have a backup tool or a secondary tool where you then go and say like, I got this piece of information. I really kind of want to check with some other spirits. Is this good info? Am I totally off base with how I'm interpreting this? And then a yes/no tool like a pendulum can give you a very quick and easy way of checking in and seeing, like getting a second opinion, shall we say, with how you've interpreted your other forms of divination. So I always love to teach pendulum. You can just get a few basic charts. You can print them out if you want. And then there you go. You have it with you, and you will then be able to have that sort of friend with you in your back pocket if you need to have a discernment check.
Yeah, because when we talk about the language of divination, I think pendulums, the reason I agree, they're the easiest to start with. They're a single item. You know, you don't have to have a whole deck or anything with you. And there's only what? Yes, no, maybe, and not. I don't feel like answering. Those are the 4 I use. So there's only 4 things that could, you know, that the language is learned. You know, that's all there is to say about it. Whereas tarot is like a whole system. Oracle cards are unique, each deck.
Yeah.
So
yes,
if you don't have a pendulum,
oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, if you don't have a pendulum, you can use a coin. You know, a coin flip.
Absolutely. I tell a story, and there was one thing that we had a really crucial decision that to be made about building our barn. And this was yes, no. You know, I'm all about, make sure that you phrase your questions correctly. That's another whole section of my book. But, you know, yes, no questions are not the best. Well, in this case, it was a yes or a no. And I didn't have any coins, but there were some washers and there was some string because it's a barn. And I made a pendulum and got a clear answer. And I think the spirits were happy. Everything went well with the build. But, you know, you can make it. And you can also know, you can grab a piece of string and a ring you're wearing or something, and you can somehow improvise a thing.
I love that. Yeah. It doesn't have to be complicated. And that's, I think, the core of it.
Exactly.
It does not have to be.
Yeah, that's the key with divination in general, is that while it does take a lot of time to, and seriousness and commitment to these systems to, you know, become a practitioner of them on a level where you feel very confident, they're also very beginner friendly. Like this, the way that I think of it is that if you, again, we go back to the language example. Well, we do yes, no. What are the few first words you learn in a language? You're probably going to learn yes, no, thank you, please. So these are your sort of first basic phrases that you want to learn. But also, most of the time when you travel and you know those few words, most people are going to be really nice and be pleased that you're attempting to speak. So for me, when I do spirit communication, I have always felt that the spirits are very happy when we try. And I think that's where the kind of beginner's luck comes from, where it's like, they really do want to reach back. When you see someone trying to speak your language, you're going to try to speak it back. You're going to try to make it easier for them. So I think having that sort of optimism of knowing that there are other spirits on the other side saying, oh, good job. Yes. Okay. We'll help you a little bit. You know, it is a very positive view of this communication process. Not always easy, but there's others that are trying to help us.
I feel like sometimes they're saying, aren't you cute?
Yes. Yeah. A little bit, yes.
So I know that when you said, Joanna, that you're communicating with spirits in divination, people's nerves went a little on edge as they're listening, because the big question I always get, especially when I used to read tarot at festivals and like live environments with strangers. I used to even read tarot in Greece where divination is illegal. But I was like, I'll risk it. Worst case, I could post this on Instagram and, you know, raise the issue of tarot being illegal here. So anyway, I would still do it there. And the question people always would ask is, who's giving you this information? What spirit is communicating? Is this going to come home with me? Is this something that I've now opened a can of worms? Is this like doing an exorcism in my house that I'm now, that is actually a concern I hear from a lot of people. And I have my own thoughts on that. I do not think that's possible, honestly, because it's a closed container when you do a reading, and it's, if anything, attached to the deck and not the other person. When I do divination in a public environment, I don't allow other people to touch my cards. I have my main deck, the Wildwood Tarot, that I harp on about all the time on the podcast, my favorite deck ever. I don't let anybody touch that. Even my bestest of friends. If it was about to fall off a cliff and you were going to save it, okay. But that's it. That is the only time I would let someone touch that deck, because it's been mine forever. Some people disagree with that. You know, they say you actually have to have the person you're reading for, the querent, do the shuffling. But anyway, all that to say, what do you say to people who are afraid of spirits coming through their deck? And how can we control, I guess this is 2 questions, but how can we kind of know who we're talking to and control that if we can?
Sure. So it's very, very important with all of this to have good spiritual hygiene. So spiritual hygiene is a very basic level of just self-protection, you know, and if you're doing your spiritual hygiene work of just simple meditation each day of some form, grounding and centering yourself, taking good care of your physical environment and your physical body as well as your spiritual body, then it's going to be very difficult for any spirit to, come and do malicious things to you. I think that it's an important topic for people to think about, but first and foremost, making basic offerings, making sure that you're doing some form of cleansing, as simple as simply washing your hands before you do a reading. I always do. I have a couple of different very small cleansing recommendations that I have in my book. It's really, it comes down to washing your hands with intention, and having a few statements that you make in order to boundary what you're going to do, and make sure that the contact that you're going to get is from helpful, spirits that have your best interests and the best interests, if you're reading for someone else, of your client or your friend in mind. That's pretty much what you need to do as a baseline. And if you have done that, those very few basic things, it really takes care of 80% of the problems. It's just basic, like, trust in the gods, but lock your car door. It's pretty much the same thing. It's not that you expect to get robbed at every turn or to get hurt at every turn, but you're doing your basic protection work. Secondarily, no, I do not think that it is very easy for spirits that have malintent to come through a deck. I have read at many public events. I have never had anything, quote, try to follow me home. Might be because I have some pretty good guards, and I do some protection work of my household, of course. But again, it's not really a thing that generally will happen unless you are either inviting it, because sometimes we are subconsciously inviting it, and we're saying, maybe I want a little bit of extra attention. Well, then spirits, might just be so inclined to provide that for you, a little extra entertainment, or because you haven't done like very, very basic spiritual hygiene practices. When I read in public, there are only specific decks that I will use and specific sets of these various other forms of divination that I use, so that people could touch them if they wanted to, or if it was accidental. But yeah, no, I have the same thing where my own private ones that are used in the home do not get touched by others. In terms of who you're talking to, that depends. So I have specific decks and I have specific tools that are linked, I think of them as telephone lines, to various types of spirits. So I have done I have a few different terms I use for this. An opening of the mouth ceremony is one way of putting it, but essentially a spirit opening for a specific tool to be then the house phone for that particular spirit, which I then have a long-term relationship with. I have a deck that is specifically for my ancestors that lives on the ancestor altar. If I need to call them, I can go there. Of course, I could use other tools to call to them. If I'm out of the house, I can speak to them using plenty of other tools. And I know that they come through at other times as well. But that's nice to have specific decks or specific tools that are then linked to a spirit. Quite straightforward to do, honestly, and anyone can. But I don't recommend having like 12. That would be kind of equivalent to having like 12 cell phones in the house. You want to keep it to only a few that are then on your advanced dial system. And then you can just quickly dial their number if you need to using that tool.
That's such a good idea. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Especially it's, and I think too, like, let's say your ancestors are from Scandinavia. Maybe you're more inclined to use runes to communicate with them. Maybe you don't normally use runes, but that's the only time you work with that system. So there's so many ways you can layer this practice.
Definitely. Yeah.
So let's talk about land and how we can use land to divine, because that's I love this book. I really do think The Diviner's Path is the best guide to starting divination I've ever read. Like, usually you can find a good book on just tarot, but to find something that's your all-encompassing guide is incredible. And you talk about things, side note, but Joanna talks about things that I did not even know about. Like, when you and I met, I had no idea there was a Greek alphabet oracular practice. And it became such a big part of the travels that we did together. And so that's all in this book as well. So I just did want to say that, because it's not just another book on divination. Like, it's the only one I've ever found that actually explains all of this. And you do talk a lot about spiritual hygiene and offerings and things that, again, I've never seen another divination book highlight, and they're extremely important things. But back to the land. That's the other thing I loved about this book, is that you actually talk about the kind of I think the inclination we all naturally have, which is to look at land for signs, to understand more deeply how to work with land. So beyond just like what we've been describing of, I noticed the robins coming closer. It's funny you said that, by the way. I also had a robin yesterday, like hang out with me, like way closer than normal.
They like
So
look
I
at
need
you.
to,
Like they are so amazing because when they're trying to divine with you or trying to send you a message, they will look at you, like intentionally look at you. It's kind of creepy sometimes, but not really.
yeah, it is. And then last night we went out, we forgot it was trash night. So it was like 11 o'clock. We go out to put the trash out and the birds are talking to me. I'm like, it's go to bed. What are you doing? Why are you awake? So so besides that, like, is there systems-based land divination out there that people could do?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so many things.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that just to go to backtrack for 1 second, part of the reason why it is titled the way it is, which is nature-led, that land base, is because I am at heart also an animist, which means that I believe that all these things are alive, which means that the tarot deck is alive in some sense, the pendulum's alive in some sense. Obviously, the robins are alive. We don't need to have that discussion. Rocks and rivers and the places where we live are alive. And therefore, by layering divination into an animist framework, the moment that you have that animist framework, it's like, well, but of course I need to talk to other beings because they're here and they're alive. So it's kind of disrespectful to be walking through the world and being like, excuse me, not talking to anyone else. So therefore, having divinatory tools allows you to, hopefully, as you learn them, open up those communication channels first and foremost, so that you have a broader palette to talk to the more broad world around us. Because you're in a living world. You know what I mean? We're not the only ones alive here. We're not the only ones living here. And therefore, once we open our eyes to that, when you live in a framework that is that, it changes how you communicate in a lot of ways. And therefore, it becomes more of a budding friendship, or at least just a social relationship that you need to take seriously. Okay, so with that being said, are there systems and tools? Yes. And cultures around the world have systematized these things in all different ways. I had a professor on my show a while back, and it's horrible, I'm blanking on his name. He's an Oxford professor who has studied a form of divination that uses spiders in Africa. And it's a very famous scholarly treatise that was done on it. I will send you guys the information so you can throw it in the show notes because it is really interesting. And so this is a systematized form of working with spiders. And the ways that the spiders act obviously then gives very clear information to people who are trained to read them. There are systems in cultures around the world that involve very specific criteria for observation of animal patterns. When an animal does this, it means that. When you go out in this way and you interact on this night in this way, these are the signs you're looking for, and this is how you interpret them. So you can pretty much look at any human culture and you're going to find what verges on a technical form of divination because it has strict rules. What I have in my book is, because I'm not obviously going to these other cultures and just being like, well, let's just port that onto our culture. No, maybe we don't do that. But we can take some of the ideas and we can look at, well, what fits with our framework, what fits within our culture. And what I suggest is a form of what I call omen watch or omen walk. There are two different things. And those are ways where you can actually go out into the world with a boundary around the practice and then ask for and receive omens. That could be bird flight, or that could be, patterns of clouds if you want to observe that, or other animal activity. But it has a boundary around it. So the things that all these different technical forms generally have in common is that they have boundaries. They have, from this time to this time, from sunup to sundown, or, vice versa, or within this 1 hour time frame, or from this point to this point in the sky, we will observe the birds. And that is essentially what you're using. You have to have the boundaries in place in order for it not to bleed out into meaninglessness at a certain point, if it just bleeds out and it has no boundaries. Does that make sense?
Imagine awakening your intuitive gifts in the land of the oracles, where it all began. At Intuition Activation, my retreat in 2027, you will walk the sacred grounds of hidden oracles, be initiated at Delphi, and hold ceremony in the Karikian cave, the birthplace of the Pythia, where you will deepen your ability to hear, trust, and embody your inner knowing. Between these powerful experiences, you'll return to a luxury villa in rural, untouched Greece, where you can integrate beside the pool or the sea. This intimate retreat is limited to only 5 people. Reserve your place at ElyseWells.com/visit Greece. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's good too, because sometimes we don't have time. We should. I mean, ideally in a world, living through the world, walking around, driving around, like we should actually be present all the time in our lives. Like I think that's like capitalism's greatest wound on humanity. Capitalism's greatest wound on humanity is telling us like, stay distracted, because that keeps us buying stuff, right? Pressure sales every day, all the time, because we're so stressed and busy and next thing, multitasking.
Also
So
culture, man.
Yeah, like we should ideally not be doing that ever. But the reality is, I think most people find themselves in that flow more than not. And so an omen walk gives you that boundary. Okay, look, I can set a timer. If you don't have 10 minutes, do 8 minutes, Like we always think we don't have the time, but we really do. Like I guarantee you have 5 to 10 minutes where you've, lost some time scrolling your phone. So take that time instead, leave the phone at home, and do a nice walk around the neighborhood.
Absolutely. And the shorter timeframes actually work to your advantage at first, because you will find that you will get distracted and you will also be discouraged by your own distractibility. And that's totally fine. That's totally normal and a part of the process. So by keeping it small in your boundaries, you make it much more manageable, and there's less pressure on you. Honestly, it doesn't take a long time to do any of these. I've been doing this now for decades at this point. Wow, I just thought of that, decades. And some of the most powerful omen walks I've done, I had given myself, I have 1 hour. And I go out and it's within the first 7 minutes that they give me the exact clear signal, which is not to say that there haven't been other times where I go out and 59 minutes into an hour-long thing, I don't feel like I've really gotten anything that's clear. I will also say that oftentimes if that happens, when I go back, and I of course, it's very, very important to keep good records and to write everything down. When I've written everything down, sometimes it takes a day or two for me to go back over that. Nothing happened except this one bird was so annoying and I kept shooing it away. And you're just in your zone of, but I need a sign, guys. I need a sign. If you could just send me a sign. Could you get out of the frame? I'm trying to get a sign
Right.
here. So you need
the bird's like, hello.
And I laugh. That's obviously a very obvious example, but there are times where it is like that and you need a day or two to go back. Or, you know what I mean? You need to build that fluency of writing it down and then observing it. Sometimes it will be very obvious. Other times you need a day or two to sort of build on that. But either way, the key point in all of this, we keep going back to it, is observation and time. And it is the thing that is the most precious and the thing that culture tries to suck away from us, precisely to keep us distracted, fearful, easily influenced. You know what I mean? The moment that you are not easily distracted, the moment you are spending more time noticing the trees and the clouds than the fear that other people want to put on you. Oh, interesting. You are a more centered individual. You are a more grounded individual. That's a very different place to live.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Much happier place in general.
Yeah, which is why we saw the great awakening we did during COVID for so many people coming to the work for the very first time, because for the first time they were home. They were not distracted.
Yes.
So,
and you also don't feel, that's the other thing about the animist framework and the arts of divination that I find so empowering, is that it is encouraging you to not feel alone. Now, there's a side of that where you can start to think that your toast is telling you to quit your job. So you have to be cautious about that, of course. But outside of the silly version of kind of that extreme, it really is a much more centered and friendly and empowering way to live, because you don't feel alone. There are beings all around you. And if you have divination and you build these practices, then you have ways of asking questions and having a communication flow back, which is so much healthier and so much more optimistic, because you are less disconnected, and that loneliness then can sort of lessen, and that makes us much more powerful and joyful creatures, really.
Yeah. And divination shouldn't, it goes without saying, it shouldn't become the distraction, and it shouldn't become this thing that guides your life for you. It gives you your agency back. Your free will is actually empowered by divination. It's not taking that free will.
And
that is going. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Oh, well, no, go ahead. Because I wanted to go back to a point you made about the journaling. So go ahead.
Sure. Just about the free will thing. I have had people ask, oh, well, I don't want to do divination because I don't want to set my fate. If I pull a card and it's negative, then I've set it in stone. I'm like, no. I go back to what Yoda says, always in motion, the future is. I'm a Star Wars fan as well. So, but it really is always in motion. And there might be some patterns, and different cultures have different ways of thinking about the layers of fate and how easy or hard they are to change. Some are almost impossible to change. You have certain flows of fate that are much bigger than you, that is just the way that the current is going. And then there are others that you can influence very significantly. And there's always possibility for you to move yourself in the flow. If it's like a river and you can orient yourself and orient your boat in various ways, the river is still going to be rivering. But how you orient your boat along those waters, that can change a lot, whether you hit a boulder or you go around it. Boulder's still there, you're still in the river, but your orientation can change a lot based on your decisions that you can make and the reflections that you make based on that. But it's not set in stone. And also I am a practicing like witch and priestess. So of course, then ritual and doing magic and doing all the other things, mundane and magical, to orient your boat then becomes the next step, the next piece of divination, which is also a thing people do not talk enough about in divinatory circles, which is that what you do next after the reading should be considered a part of the reading. Reading isn't over just because you're like, oh, I got the Queen of Cups. Cool. What are you going to do with that? You're gonna embody her somehow? Or is this telling you something about the situation? How is that going to be reflected in your life and your actions? And writing that down too, in addition to your interpretation of the Queen. But really, how do I see this in my life? Is a big part of it too. And that's part of that fate and free will. You got to act then.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like in spell work, you don't just cast a spell and expect the spell to do all the work. You've got to back it up with action. And that really does take us back to the thought I had about my experience with writing down my experiences. I do it to this day. The whole incident with the robin and the bees and everything, that went right in my journal, and I will reflect on it as I move through my path. Am I following the messages that I was given? Am I taking action? But I also found that, what you were talking about, like blocking out time to learn the practice or to divine, in nature, especially. This is how I learned how to do dendromancy and sycomancy. I would always question myself. Oh, did I really get that? Like, was that leaf blowing this way really a message, or am I just imagining things? So writing it down and taking that time helped me to stop dismissing and build confidence in my reading ability. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, is feeling confident that they know what they know. Because we know what we know. We might not be able to explain how we know what we know. But if we don't reflect on it, then it kind of goes to the wayside and our self-doubt can take over. And yeah, I just wanted to make that a point for our listeners, that we doubt ourselves too much because we're not reflecting on the messages. We're not looking at how they play out, and we're not taking action, like the Queen of Cups. We're not taking action on the messages that we're receiving. And how we're going to remember every single message we receive if we're not writing it down.
Yeah. And I think some people are like, but I'm not a journaler. Okay. You don't have to be a journaler. You don't have to write a poem every time, but you can just note down, Q of C, Queen of Cups, going to, go to the, I'm going to go to the spa later today. Great. That's wonderful. That is an interpretation and an action that you are taking to embody that. That is perfectly fine. And if you really don't want to write anything down, then you can simply do voice notes to yourself and have it transcribed. Technology is a wonderful thing these days, but it really does make a big difference. Also, what you're talking about, the self-doubt portion, it's a really important thing for diviners. And I think about it every single day, certainly every day that I divine for someone else, because it's a huge responsibility. And if you are not taking that responsibility seriously, then that's probably a problem. You should be thinking, how am I doing with this? Because it is a responsibility. It's a responsibility to ourselves or to other people. So that healthy sense of, I need to make sure that I am speaking with as much like flow, intuitive flow, and the respectfulness to the art and the respectfulness to the spirits and the person that I'm reading for in that case, that I can, while also, respecting your own agency. That's where a lot of divination also takes a lot of discernment and time spent on self-reflection. Know thyself, is the most important first key to the art. And I spend a healthy portion of the beginning of that book going over, really taking some time to look at what your strengths and weaknesses are, looking equally at both, not being, afraid of either, because we are all strong and weak in various ways. And then you can build on those strengths, and you can be aware of, like, what are your anxieties that might creep in when you're doing a reading for someone? Like, what are your things that might become illusions if you're not aware of them, if you're not reflecting on them? And that self-reflection is much easier if you're writing your readings down, or if you're doing some form of meditation and journaling practice. It's why it's basically crucial. Like I can't say that it is optional. It is definitely crucial. If you want to improve at any of these arts, whatever art it is, you're going to have to incorporate that form of meditation and reflection, either in an audio form that you transcribe or in written form.
And I don't know about you guys, but when I go into the liminal space, either in ritual as a priestess, or reading, or in these spaces where I'm communicating deeply with spirit, when I come out of that, I don't remember much. So I need to document it, because it's like this fleeting, it's like a dream. It's like, it just fleeting away. And like, what did we talk about? I don't know, because it was that moment. It's that liminal space. So if you're not writing it down immediately, like a dream, you have like 7 seconds to remember it, and then it's gone.
Psychologically, we all believe that we have better memories than we do. It's like proven by science. All of us are deluded about that. No, I'll remember. Really, I will. No, science says you won't. I'm sorry. And then doubly so when we're talking about these spiritual types of, like, even light trance state, for like just pulling cards. Like you're gonna have tranced out in some way, depending especially on the question or the context. So yeah, then it becomes even more important, because you will lose more than you ever expect to, sadly.
And I know we're running long, but one last thing I just wanted to point into this free will conversation. I have had readings where I wanted one answer and I could not get the cards to align. There was an experience I had that I was invited to participate in, and I did not want to go. I had nothing but red flags about all of it. And yet I got 10 of cups if I go, 9 of swords if I don't go. And I was like, oh no. Okay. All right. Great. Let's try again. Because maybe the deck was not in the mood. 3 of cups if I go, 10 of swords if I don't go. And I'm like, okay, this is not all right. So I went. I followed the cards, not my own intuition. And it ended up being, my intuition was actually correct, but I got so much out of the experience because of the environment that we were in. On the flip side of that, I had to make a really hard decision recently. And the divination was essentially, here's how it will go if you make either decision. And I was like, okay, but which decision should I make? And they're like, again, here's how it can go with that decision and this decision. Like, it was leaving it so firmly in my court. I used 2 different decks. I did readings over 3 different days. It didn't matter. They were giving me the choice completely. And neither side they're both hard, but both are, good in different ways. It showed me all the facts on both sides. So divination, I just really want people to know, like, it will never force you to do something. It will just like deity work, just like ancestor work, no spirit work is going to force you to do anything. If it is, that's something else. That's a clinical conversation to have with a professional. Divination is always going to give you options and clarity on those options. And then you do the rest, including, like we said, the work beyond the reading.
It's another form of intelligence gathering. Like it's you are going to get
It's
more
data.
information. It's data. And what you do with that, of course, that's a whole, we don't have time to go into that, but then the art of interpretation and like, what do we do with that data? And what is that we're the other side of it, because that is very much, I find it funny how sometimes I think it really is somehow the mechanistic view of the world that we really have these days, where if you punch in numbers and you punch this button on your computer, a thing happens, and it is always the same. And that, the ability to repeat experiments like that is very, very important. And on one level, as you were very clearly showing from that, divination will work that way, and frequently does, sometimes especially when we don't want it to. But there's also the art of interpretation, and that art of like, what is it that we do with the answer we're given? And that is where our free will comes in, because it is always your choice. It is always your divine responsibility in an incarnate body to make decisions about what you do with what the spirits tell you. It is one form of information. You take it in along with all the other forms of information, all the conversations you're having with friends and family, the other like trusted opinions and things you're getting. And then that's what you bring in, is that further conversation that you're having that then gets melded. And with your beautiful, divineness, you then make a decision. You then go out into the world and act on it in a hopefully more wonderful way.
Beautifully said. And on that note, I believe you have something coming up soon.
I do. Yes. So if people are curious to sort of follow along and to take a course with me, to take a journey with me into more of that experimentation of how we craft good questions, of how we kind of learn to incorporate multiple tools together with good questions and then interpret, where I'm going to be doing a first run of a short course on the art of a diviner's path for people who are, you could be a beginner, you could also be an intermediate, or you could be curious about really putting these tools together in the way that I have in the book, and also some new things I've come up with this summer that are not in the book, of course, because I couldn't fit all of it in there. It's dense, but no, it's not all there. So the course is going to open in mid to late September. The exact start date hasn't been set, but I'm sure that you can find all the information on my website. And you can always send me an email or chat with me on Instagram. I love, clearly, as you can tell, talking about divination. So I'll talk all day about this.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah,
all
thank you.
of your information, coffeeanddivination.com, your at Coffee and Divination on Instagram is all in the show notes as well, so people can follow you. And yeah, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It is wonderful to talk with you both. So thank you.
Merry meet,
Merry part, and merry meet again.
Thank you for joining us on the Magick Kitchen Podcast. Please visit my website, leandrawitchwood.com, for news, information, and more episodes.
I'm Elyse Wells. You can learn more about my current offerings and my upcoming retreats to Greece at ElyseWells.com. That's ELYSEWELLES.com. Join Leandra and me this Halloween at Samhain Fest, October 31st and November 1st in Havre de Grace, Maryland. This awesome festival has Laura Tempest-Zakroff as our keynote speaker, and you'll be able to shop handcrafted treasures and connect with your ancestors in a powerful Samhain ritual led by my coven. You can enjoy witchy covers from queer cryptid rock band Field of Embers on Saturday night, and we've got lots of speakers, including diversity and queer ancestor practices with Enfys J. Book, Decolonizing Death with Reverend Ron Padron, Ancestral Tattooing with Jake Morningstar, Poison Path Magic with Datura with Kobe Michael, Honoring the Dead with Judy Ann Knock, and I will be speaking on how to work with Artemis and Hecate as guides of life and death. Leandra will be there hosting a tea ceremony, and all of us will be available for book signings. You can get your tickets at samhainfest.com. That is SAMHAIN fest.com. We hope to see you there.